everyone, welcome to our channel. Today I take great pleasure in presenting our special guest for today, Dr. Vikramjit Lahiri. Vikramjit is currently working as a pharmaceutical consultant in Boston, USA. Vikram is a dear friend of mine, and I had the privilege of knowing him during my master's studies. We had both applied for internships offered by the Indian Academy of Sciences. After that, Vikram actually supported me a lot during my PhD applications, helped with my SOPs, and he has also taught me how to kayak. Vikram has always been a straight A student. He has always been the college topper. He has worked with some of the most renowned scientists in the world. Coming from a very humble Indian background, Vikram has successfully navigated diverse educational and research areas. He has kindly consented to take some time out of his busy schedule today to answer a few questions about his experience studying and working in the US. Thank you very much, Vikramjit, for your time today. So let's get started. So, can you tell us briefly about your current job? What exactly do you do as a pharmaceutical consultant?
Yeah, thank you, Vidisha, for having me here. Thanks for the kind introduction. I don't know if everything you said about me is true, but I did teach you how to kayak. Um, so currently, in my role as a pharmaceutical consultant, and previously also I worked in management consulting, focusing on pharma. The day-to-day is really advising clients who are C-suite adjacent in pharma companies on how to strategize the development of their drugs, or in some other projects, how to strategize market access, market share, or even penetration into HCPs or patients by increasing awareness of their products, which are typically, novel pharmaceuticals, could be small molecule kinase inhibitors, for example, or monoclonal antibodies, which are known as biologics.
That's very interesting to hear. So, what made you choose to be a pharmaceutical consultant or work as a pharmaceutical consultant after your PhD? What did you find so attractive about this job?
Well, there are several things that I found interesting. A part of which is definitely getting an insight into how the business side of biology works. Being trained in biology, first in biochemistry and then in molecular biology through my undergrad and PhD. I had a fair grasp of the science. But then science is science in the lab, and then how it translates to society, as in case of biology and medicine, as drugs, as medicines to the patient, was something that I had no insight into. Just consulting, I figured out, would give me an insight into that part of the process. And as much as I love research, I still love research. I thought exposure into that would be something new and exciting for me. So I decided I wanted to try that out. And if I didn't like it, I could always go back to a traditional like postdoc research route. But so far, it's been very exciting, and I like it.
So, what skills are necessary to be a pharma consultant, and how did you acquire those skills during your PhD? Did you have to take particular courses?
Yeah, I don't think there is like a specific skill set that you have to, have to be a consultant. You learn a lot of things on the job in the consulting world, especially, and I can speak to pharma-focused consulting. Hiring out of a PhD program is very specific. It's a very niche sort of a role. So the hiring is very selective and specific in that they are looking for people who obviously have a core training in biology and science, so they can think in a very in what we call the scientific method, because that applies to a lot of things that are done in the consulting world, including hypothesis generation, data collection, generation of like plots, graphs, figures that can be easily conveyed to the client. And often you're like you are so deep and detailed into what your sort of investigating as a consultant, and often you have to present it to the client like they're a 5-year-old. And that's not meant to like insult the client in any way. It's just that the client is thinking of so many more things. They just need the high level picture and, a science background of being able to distill complex data information into simple illustrations. really helps in that regard. So that's what they're really looking for, a very scientific minded, intelligent applicant. But what they're also looking for is a demonstrated interest in business. So when you're thinking of skills, it's more like you have to show that you have an interest in business, and not just by saying that you do, but by showing that you have taken steps in that direction, which could mean, for example, taking courses, some courses, business related courses. For example, I took courses at Michigan's MBA school, Ross School of Business. I also did a graduate level entrepreneurship certificate, which again, it wasn't geared towards when I started towards a consulting career. I was just interested, which is why I did it. But then later I got feedback and learned that that was something that was very impactful on my resume, because that demonstrated that I was interested in the business side of things as well. And that's really all they're looking for. Additionally, what would really help is networking and developing connections. Like I said, it's a very niche, selective, specific hiring process. There won't always be open applications that you can, just find on on their website. It'll just help to have a network, and the best way to build that network is to do internships. These are called immersion programs. So for PhD students who are interested in being a consultant post PhD in the pharma industry, they're not like month-long internships, because PhD students can't leave their research and go out for a month or two. It's a week-long immersion program, and they are just like super helpful to understand the company, the work that's being done, and developing those connections. Which and also it translates to almost like a first-round job interview offer more often than not. So just developing, showing interest, taking some courses, which will, if you're interested, of course, and then, looking for those internships. Finally, case competitions, and they have them all throughout the country, throughout the year, which are like competitions where you're given a problem in a week to solve it as part of a team. And you can pick your own team or be a part of a random team. Those also demonstrate your interest in consulting and in problem solving, which is really what they're looking for. So that's something I did as well. This is a long-winded answer to what you asked, but I think this is the whole like collection of everything that would be helpful for a PhD student as if they want to transition to a consulting career.
Thank you very much. No, you really answered my question and also my following question. So I guess there are a lot of options actually, and that's very interesting to know, because I was also wondering that what should I put in my resume if I wanted to start my career as a pharmaceutical consultant. But really, there are many options. Also, as a PhD student, if someone doesn't find internships, maybe they can do some courses or participate in case competitions or maybe entrepreneurial workshops. So, any probably activity or something that demonstrates that candidate has the right skills or competencies to work as a pharmaceutical consultant counts, I guess.
Yes, anything that counts towards demonstrating interest in business and in consulting is very highly appreciated. Um, Additionally, if you're at a school which has a consulting club, Michigan did. So being a part of that club, maybe being a leadership position in that club, I was the vice president of the club. That definitely has, that shows that you're invested. And really, there are so many good candidates that these companies can hire. They're really looking for, in addition to the skills and the I guess your grades, they're looking for that specific interest and initiative. Additionally, if the school has, and this is rare, which is why I didn't bring it up unprompted, but some schools do have clubs or organizations that actively do consulting engagements pro bono. Michigan did. I was part of that company at Michigan as well. But that's not something everybody might have exposure, sort of the opportunity for. But everything else I listed before, that's definitely something that can be done from anywhere. So would be more fit for all. But if any of those other opportunities that I just mentioned are available to you, then those are something that you might want to strongly consider and putting on your resume as well.
Okay, so For preparation for interviews for the job, in addition to having the right skills on the resume, is there something specific that you would like to mention that the candidate has to keep in mind or has to go for if the candidate gets an interview and has to prepare for the interview? So something like special or something that would set the candidate apart from others?
Well, what sets you apart is really your resume. Uh, the interview is for those like people who were set apart from that resume pool. But what helps in the interview is not setting you apart, but is your preparedness. So consulting interviews are different from any other kind of interviews because in those interviews you're actually given a problem and you have to walk your interviewer through the problem and solve it in 40 minutes, typically 40 to 45 minutes. So, it's not like a regular get to know you, some technical question sort of an interview. It's a very directed problem solving interview. So I think it requires a significant amount of preparation, which is called case prep. There are materials available both in print and online for that. If anybody's interested, they can look at like case preparation for consulting interviews. That's a good like Google keyword search, and they'll come across resources. Um, but yeah, and what I'd suggest is case interview, mock interviews in person with a partner. By that, I mean another person who's also actively preparing, which is, or somebody who's experienced, because there's nothing like a live mock of, I mean, you can read as much as you want, you can solve by yourself as much as you want, but that live feedback and interaction and solving a problem in that setting is, I think, really important for the preparation because you never know what curveball your interviewer is going to throw at you, what kind of questions you're going to be asked. And often you'll probably know the answer. You'll just be too anxious to respond properly at that moment. So doing those mock interviews will be very helpful. And in general, I'd like recommend like 6 to 9 months of casing preparation, learning about casing, learning the content, learning how to respond to questions best. And then doing those live mock case interviews before the actual interview.
Okay, so moving to the work culture or the work environment, how is your work-life balance? What about vacations? How many vacations do you get every year?
Work-life balance is a very generalized term. If you have to contextualize it in terms of the general like expectation in consulting, as you would expect from maybe other like client-facing services such as legal, like for lawyers, consultants also like have a significantly higher work expectation because you're always trying to sort of go above and beyond for the client. So it's not a traditional 9 to 5. It typically, I would say, is a 9 to 10 hour work day. So we think of it as like maybe like an 8 to 6. So if you think of, strictly in terms of work-life balance, if you're looking for 9 to 5, consulting isn't for you. But consulting does afford you the opportunity to grow and learn a lot of things very quickly. Um, and anytime you learn something quickly, it's intense. So if you're curious and you want to learn, and if you're willing to put in a few extra hours a day, it's a great opportunity to get real good insight into an industry by being a consultant because you support so many projects at the same time. But then it does get a little intense, a little more work hours than other jobs. In terms of, but if you like what you do, then it's not that bad. So when transitioning to a consulting career, that's really what you have to think about is that what I want? One trap I feel like is the compensation in the consulting world is generally slightly higher than in the other, like if you went to the pharma industry, and significantly higher than if you did a postdoc. So it's very easy to get swayed by the comp. I'm gonna lie if I said I didn't like that number, didn't like seem appealing to me. It did. It honestly did. But if you don't like what you do, then consulting is hard. It's hard to survive in. So you'd have to like what you do. And then if that happens, then kind of that extra hour doesn't really impact your balance that much because you're not really dreading it. In terms of vacations, I think every company has a different policy. You could have a fixed number of vacation days, typically between 15 to 20, or your company could have unlimited PTO days. Again, with consulting, since it's client facing and you work in a team, teamwork and collaboration are important. So you kind of have to actively manage your vacation time so it doesn't impact the work stream or other people on the team. So again, it requires a bit of thinking. You can't just up and leave at any time for like 5 days. So again, it's a little more challenging than another job, but I think it's definitely manageable um, if uh, if you're well intentioned to want to take a vacation, which I'd say is very important as a consultant because if you don't, you probably burn out pretty quickly.
That's very interesting, and I'm really glad that you touched all the points, not just your work-life balance, but also why such you mentioned that it has kind of an intense work hours and the higher pay, which totally makes sense because there are a lot of people wanting to transition to being a pharmaceutical consultant, and they're aware of the intense work environment or maybe faster work schedules, but the pay definitely makes a difference. And even if probably people are willing to learn more, they maybe don't find a reason to necessarily work longer without getting compensated a bit more than being a postdoc or being a PhD student. So yeah, I think these are very important information to that would help many candidates who are interested in pharmaceutical consultant to decide if this job is the right fit for them. So you are currently working from home, right? I mean, is that, and I know a lot of other people working as pharmaceutical consultants also working from home or having remote jobs. Is that normal for as in consultancy, or is it specifically after COVID that most consultancy jobs started becoming remote?
I think definitely after COVID, work from home has become a little more normalized. Previous it was always in office, very rarely from home. Now it's like, work from home is, it is considered work. Although, if you asked our parents, they'd be like, oh, work from home means basically a holiday, which isn't. Um, I work from home. My position when I applied, it was a remote position, and that hasn't changed. However, like I wouldn't say all consulting roles are work from home. In fact, now there has been a push, especially in the US, to have people back in the office. So most consulting companies are pushing for like at least a 2 to 3 day a week work from office sort of a situation, a hybrid situation where you work 2 to 3 days out of the office. However, my role is completely remote, so and in many cases, consulting, especially in pharma, roles can be, kind of conducted remotely. But again, because consulting is so teamwork based, there's also value in being in the office with your peers, with your team. And of course, that makes sense only if your team is in the same location. So if your company has offices in London, and Munich, and you're in the US, and three people are from three different parts of the world and you go into the office to do a Zoom meeting, that doesn't make sense. But yeah, it really depends on where your team is. If you're in the same team, in the same country, in the same location, yeah, there's more of a push to work from the office.
Since you transitioned to industry directly after your PhD, how did your visa situation work out?
Yeah, so currently I'm on an O1 visa, which is sort of visa that, I was fortunate to receive based on my PhD work largely. Um, when I switch, when I transition, like as you're a PhD student in the US, you're on an F1 visa typically, and you get granted like a program of 3 years called an OPT program, optional practical training. So you get first a year, and then if you're in a STEM field, you get another 2 years. So initially, when I started, that was my work authorization, the OPT, and then the STEM OPT. And then after that runs out in 3 years, so you have to figure out your next step to obtain a visa. That's typically an H-1B, which I think most of your listeners are very familiar with. It's also been in the news. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to, I couldn't get an H-1B because of my previous visa that I had. that was funded through governmental scholarships. So I had to get this different visa. But usually it's not something difficult to navigate. Just if you're an international applicant applying to like the industry in any job, you should always make sure that the company is willing to sponsor your visa because you don't want to be in a situation where you're working without knowing that the company will sponsor a visa. Because then once your OPT runs out, there's nothing else you can do.
Do you have knowledge about the prospects of working as a pharma consultant in India after already working in the US, or the possibility of applying the transferable skills that you acquire working as a pharmaceutical consultant in the US to positions in India?
Well, to be fair, I'm not an expert. I haven't really looked at roles in India in great detail. Um, However, I do not think that opportunity exists as such in India because like I said, the pharma consultant role is to really inform clients about their strategies in drug development, drug commercialization, patient access, and all of that works when you have a high value drug which they're trying to bring to market, as a novel therapy. In India, it's usually drugs that have been available in the West for a while and that gets like approved for use in India. It's not unfortunately enough, it's not a big money maker for these companies, so they don't really focus on that geo. So in India, you don't have often have these roles. In India, the consulting market is more geared towards like what is really big in India. So if you think like consumer goods, like FMCG, if you think education, uh, all of this is huge in India. So consulting roles in those fields are much more common. In finance. Like my brother is a chartered accountant, so he's a tax auditor. He's a consultant for PwC, works currently with Meta. So all of that is big, but pharma is not that big in India as a consulting sort of opportunity.
Okay, that's a very important piece of information because a lot of students, postdocs, want to come back to India after a brief work experience. So, probably pharmaceutical consultancy is not the best choice for those candidates who want to come back to India and continue working in a similar job.
Yeah, not in the pharma industry, not in pharma consulting, but they could like take the skills from consulting in this industry to consulting in the other industries I mentioned, like FMCG. Well, finances require a different kind of education and training, but education or any other consulting field that's more generalized.
Coming back to your PhD, what made you choose the University of Michigan for your PhD, and what were the eligibility criteria in addition to good grades?
So I chose the University of Michigan because I had the opportunity to be here, be at the university before I started my PhD, a year before as part of the Indian government's Khurana Fellowship, the summer research program for undergraduates. I was at U of M for 3 months doing undergraduate research. Loved the experience. Never thought I'd moved to the US for my PhD, but I loved Michigan so much that I decided to come back. And fortunately, I was accepted. So, I ended up at Michigan. Aside from, I think the second part of your question was, what does it take? I think it takes for you to be really lucky, as I was. But also takes like, good grades. It definitely helps to build up your profile as you did as well. I know you completed an internship at the University of East Anglia. So any internship where you've demonstrated that you're able to work independently or semi-independently in a lab, able to generate hypothesis, test, generate data, present data, um, have the experience of doing research. So any of these research fellowships, both whether like national or international, if you can publish, that's definitely an icing on the cake. I think PhD applications are becoming more and more competitive with every passing year. So if you have a publication, that's also very helpful to your resume. And then I think grades do matter. I don't think they matter the most when applying to the US. I can't speak of Europe because I haven't applied. But in the US, the grades aren't the end all be all. It's more about like what else you bring to the table, about your statement of intent, which is like the statement of purpose, how you write that, how you convey who you are and what you want to do and why you want to do it. And I think again, a very important part is the letter of recommendation. So make sure that if you're applying, you have referees who know you well, who can speak to all aspects of your education, research abilities, and make sure that they can write you a faithfully accurate but sound good recommendation letter because that carries a lot of weight.
It looks like you finished your PhD in roughly 5 years and with many, many publications. That's a remarkable timeline. So, is that normal for a PhD in your research area, or is it just because you are exceptionally talented?
Well, I appreciate you calling me talented. I don't think I am. I think it's just like a publication is a lot of luck in addition to hard work. So I just happened to work with like an advisor who was very helpful, who was always who identified my skill sets well and wanted me to wanted to provide me with all the opportunities that he could get me. Some of my very early published works aren't research papers, they're review papers, which fortunately have been very highly cited because I like writing. And it gave me an opportunity to learn the field in my early years of my PhD, while at the same time publish in high impact journals with a systematic literature review of the field. And my advisor also enjoys writing, writes very well. So it was a great experience for me to learn the field, learn how to write, and in this at the same time get like good traction with publications, and get my name out there in the community and the field. So I think I've been incredibly lucky. In terms of my research output, again, it really depends in the life sciences, especially on your project. There's no set like formula. You could work very hard, be very smart, and put in your best effort. But if you have a challenging project, you could just publish one paper in 5 years. Um, if it's challenging project, it's usually be a high impact paper, and that's really good. Even if it's not, I don't think for the next step, when you're being hired, if you're being hired for a postdoc, because I think we talked about consulting, but if you want to go to the postdoc route, people aren't really, or the person who hire you is not really looking for how much you've published, but what you've learned. PhD is intended to be a training period for you to be an independent scientist later. So if you've learned how to be independent, how to do research, and that's what they're looking for. Your postdoc is really the time when you publish, uh, geared towards having your own lab group. So the number of publications isn't important, but what you learned and what you bring to the table as a postdoc is. So your skills.
What were some of the goals that you had set during your PhD that helped you become so successful?
Well, I was a noob when I started my PhD. I had no idea what I was doing. A headless chicken probably would do better. Um, I, my goal was maybe a little misguided initially. I thought like my goal was to publish as much as possible, as quickly as possible, which is not the way to go. I think the best way to go is, I mean, it's a good idea to want to publish. It should be, very intentional about what work you do. And I think that's something that you demonstrated very well during your PhD, that everything that you did was, intended and geared towards a publication, which in the end of the day, a publication is, proof of your work. So that's something that, I'm going to answer this as what should be the goals of a PhD student. It should be to learn the area that they want to be in, not necessarily the area they're most comfortable in, but the area they want to be in the future. Learn that area really well, develop skill sets that will help them, be an independent scientist in that area, and then conduct experiments and take on research projects with the intent of publishing, not just the intent of doing experiments for the sake of experiments, but thinking of what experiments would be most helpful to drive home a finding, to build a story around it, and to be able to publish it, because ultimately that's what is the proof of your intellect and work.
So, looking back, what would you have done differently if you were given a chance to redo your PhD all over again?
That's a hard question to answer because I mean I feel like I've been extremely lucky with my PhD advisor who's like aside from being one of the most renowned scientists in the world is one of the best people that I've ever met, a great mentor. So maybe if I do it all over again, I'd just do the same thing. Maybe the one change would be I'd have more like intent towards like publishing. I often did experiments because it was my fancy to do them, not because I was thinking of like how this fits into a publication. So so yeah, maybe that. Maybe one advice would be I chose my field based on what I was familiar with, what my I thought what my expertise was in. But sometimes I felt that I didn't like. Maybe I could have chosen something that I was more excited about. So maybe that's an advice, like try to like balance what your expertise is versus what excites you, because they always might not be the same thing. And I think if you're caught between the two, maybe it's better to choose what is more exciting for you, because you can always gain expertise. It's hard to find excitement in everything.
So, what advice would you give to students who are looking forward to pursue their PhD in the US and more specifically in life science? Like, should they be expecting some kind of surprise, or I know there's a big culture shock or a shift in culture, and what specifically would you recommend them to be careful about, or maybe they should be aware of, or maybe they should look forward to?
I think this is more geared towards lifestyle, because I think we talked about like the process itself, the recommendation, the research exposure, the publications, etc. But in terms of lifestyle, I mean, learn how to cook, I suppose. I didn't know how to cook. Learned when I moved here. It's an essential life skill. Learn how to manage your own time and life. I think, and this might be, most people might already know how to do this better than I did when I was applying. But it's a big learning curve here as to how to manage my own time and do all the chores in the house. Manage so that I had clean underwear, starting the week, that I had enough food, manage your budget. PhD salaries are, they are, livable. I wouldn't say they're bad, but they're not luxury. So learning how to manage a budget, learning how to manage your time, how to get everything, all your work done and all your chores done, because if you don't get your chores done, you won't be able to survive. But then also making the time to have fun, to make friends, because if you move to the US, it's such a melting pot of cultures, diversity, and like so many different kinds of people. You should be like it'd be very remiss if you missed out on interacting, making friends from like people from all over the world. So managing time so that you have these opportunities is so important. At the end of the day, you have to have fun. That's what the life is about, right? You have to have your funometer on the high and the red. So just making sure you have everything done so you can have fun.
That's actually very good to hear, but I would not believe that you didn't know how to cook at all, because you do actually cook really well. One of the like tastiest dishes that I have had, you are very good at cooking. Maybe you don't like so much, so you think that you are not very good. But maybe we should do another session on time management where you can probably teach people or teach students how to manage their time, because as far as I know, I have known you as one of the best time managers. You manage to do so much, have fun, party, work out, be in the lab, and cook for yourself, and then do a bunch of stuff. Also, in addition to teaching me how to kayak and go out on kayaking and hiking with me so many times. So, definitely, it's understandable that you are being very humble, but yeah, I think you should really start doing these time management workshops for students or everybody.
Well, again, I think I'm very poor at managing my time. I just know that it's important, and I just somehow try to make ends meet with that. But yeah, I mean, it's important to learn, and I think it's something that you learn when you're thrust into the deep end. Yeah, and for example, I like working out, and during my PhD in the initial years, I was like oh, well, today is so busy. I'll go work out for 30 minutes. I'll just not go work out to have a deadline. But the way I sort of evolved was like, I was like, well, I will work out 1.5 hours no matter what. And everything else has to like, I have to manage everything else to fit into the rest of the time. That may just sometimes could be more efficiency instead of like, being 80% focused for 40 minutes. I can be 100% focused for 30 minutes and still get the same result. And the 10 extra minutes can go towards something else. So that's something I actively try to do. Um, yeah. And in terms of like teaching you how to kayak and going hiking with you, I'm never opposed to spending time with pretty women. Just so it's out there.
Well, thank you so much. So, okay, moving on to PhD curriculum. So, by the end of PhD, students are typically expected to publish at least one paper. Some students manage to publish multiple papers, like you. What would be your recommendations? Should PhD students focus more on getting quality publications, maybe let's say getting one paper in a very high impact factor journal, or maybe it doesn't matter if they can manage to get multiple papers but in lower impact factor journals? So what my question is mainly that, are impact factors important, or are they considered evaluated during future job applications?
I think it depends on the project. If you and your advisor think that the project is sufficiently powerful to get like a very high impact or a high impact publication, by all means go for it. Like put all your energies into it and try to get a high impact publication out of it. Um, However, if the project or the goal of the lab is not to like do one very high impact publication, but a number of smaller, medium level publications, that's also fine. I think again, the PhD process is the process of training, not a process like not a time when you're expected to publish, because when you're interviewing for a postdoc position, I think the person who's interviewing you does not know how much input your advisor had into those papers. So, I mean, really, it really depends on the project. I think two or three medium impact publications and one very high impact publication amount to very similar. Of course, if you have a tearaway nature paper, that's different. And if you, by all means, if you think you can get that, put all your energy into it. But it's hard to get it. It's a high risk, high reward. So be cognizant of that when pursuing that. It's also a good idea to have a safety project in addition to like a high risk, high reward. So in case that doesn't end up being where you want it to be, or sometimes as is with science, it doesn't end up anywhere at all, you have something to fall back on. And of course, it's best to collaborate on as much as possible. So you have as many projects you can put your put your feet so in as many bowls as possible. So you have more to show for your work and time.
It's very good to hear from you as well, because I also recommend students having safety projects so that they can publish something out of it. If it's probably an easy story or something more predictable, but at least they can get some publication out of it if their main project fails and if they're aiming for something really high in their main project. But I guess from my personal experience, it also depends a lot, not just on the project, but also on the supervisor, because there are some PIs who only want to publish in high impact factor publications, which is probably fair on their side because they have been doing that for many years. It's easier to get grants that way. And then some PIs who don't really care about the impact factor, but they just want the science to be done well and the story to make sense, and such that the story contributes well to the scientific community in general.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why I said like it's both like you and your advisor. I think people, advisors or scientists who publish like there's some labs that just publish in Nature Science Cell, for example. They obviously wouldn't want to go something lower. But they also have those questions that they think can get into those publications. Not every question, and not because the question itself is bad, because some questions are sexier, and sometimes what you need to get into like science is like something sexy, not something that's not necessarily like something doesn't get into science. It's not because it's like not good enough or not the data is not solid enough or the question or the research wasn't thorough enough. It's just that it's not sexy enough in the field at the moment.
Our last question for today. So, do you have any plans to go back to India, or you are quite happy with your job here and you want to settle in the US?
Well, what they say, save the hardest for the last. Um, I honestly don't know. I like my life in the US. I haven't lived in India for a while now. I think going back would definitely present some challenges. Of course, career opportunities in my field, as I alluded to earlier, are sort of limited in India. Um, but there's so many other factors in life to consider other than career. So we'll see how everything plays out. Um, I just, I think I'm very, as a person, very adaptable. So I think that as a consultant, that's what it teaches you. A PhD too, like to be very adaptable. So I don't know, wherever I end up, I'll just find a way to be happy.
Thank you, Vikramjit, for your time today. It was a great pleasure knowing you, knowing about your education, about your work experience. I'm sure all the viewers will benefit a lot from the knowledge you have just shared. Thank you again. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for watching today's video.
It was a pleasure being here. These are fantastic questions. I'm sure your viewers will benefit, if not from my advice, it's from other people on your podcast, and they'll give some great advice for them to follow.